All right, let's do this. Chapter 2 in 15 minutes or less. Um, our big three concepts that we're going to be talking about tonight are metaphysics, epistemology, and axiology. And those are the three lenses that we're going to be looking through to figure out basically the rest of this class. Talk about thinking about what people are, who they are, what they value, those types of things. It all comes down to those three fundamental questions, fundamental viewpoints or pieces to uh, philosophy. And this is more of a philosophy 101 type of a chapter than it is an educational chapter. But without these three core concepts, it's really tough to have the rest of this class. So we're going to be talking about these three terms to know. And again, you're going to be using them for the rest of your time in this class, so get to know them very, very well. One is going to be metaphysics, and that's knowing what is real. And so when we're talking about that, we're talking about is the world we live in real, or is it just, or we can't tell it's real because the only way we can perceive it is through our senses, and our senses can lie to us. How do we know what's true or not? How do we know if the things we experience are true, or how do we know if God is true, or if God is right and He puts down what's true? How do we know that the Bible is true? Um, and then what do we value? And then how do we decide value? And so we're going to start with kind of that metaphysics question of what is real and what is not real. And that's going to be a lot of the groundwork that's going to lay down through the rest of this course. And the first one we're going to be talking about in the next chapter, we're going to talk about two. Um, we're going to talk about Plato and Aristotle, and they both believed in this, that there was a definable reality to the world that we can go and that actually really does kind of just thread down into epistemology what is knowledge and truth, what is value. And then we're going to later on in the course, we're going to learn about people who think that, oh, we can't really know if there's reality or not. And therefore, that's going to go down into we can't really know truth or not, or beautiful is what you make of it, and that sort of a thing. And so we're really going to be starting with that metaphysics and then moving down to knowledge and truth about what is true, what is real, and how do we know it. And then again, what do we value? What is beautiful? That type of a thing. And so there are four aspects to metaphysics, the cosmology. Origins, where did we come from? How did the earth start? How did our mental being become? And those types of things. And then theology. What is there God? Is there not? Is this all a big physical piece of things, or is there more of a uh, individualized approach to it where we're creating our own reality in our head, or is there a higher being creating that reality? And so we're going to start looking at those, and then man, what is consists of man? Soul, not a soul. If we were to cut off your head and stick it on another person, would that still be the other person, or would that be you because your brain is on them? And because your brain is controlling that whole body, is the body actually the man, or is it the head that's the man, or is it the soul that's the man? And then, where is the soul, and how do you transfer a soul? Um, if like I said, if 90% of that body is theirs, somebody else's, but we stick your head on there, and you're thinking and doing those things, who is that? Then, last one's ontology, and that's existence. How do we know we exist? And who exists? Do you know if somebody else exists? And so those are the four major ones of those. Great epistemology questions to ponder. Can reality be known? Is truth relative or absolute? Is such knowledge subjective or objective? And is there truth and independent of human experience? And this goes down a lot to even we're looking at that mission statement tonight, uh, saying, is the mission statement say what that absolute truth is? Is it, to know God better? Is it to be able to, is it, where we're starting to look into more of a, more of a community view to things where we're really getting into the nitty gritty of what is good is useful. And we'll get into those later. We'll get into like a pragmatism later that's going to go into those things. But right now, as we really start to look at what is it that's true and how do we know it? And those are interesting questions to kind of go down. And if we don't know if anything's true, why are we teaching kids those things, or why are we teaching our patients those things? If the whole purpose of life is to get into heaven, and a person who's had a saintly life walks into a hospital, well, you know, is it really worth it to try to work on the physical form when we really need to be working, letting them, nurture the mind and spirit, and or how does it the combination of those two things? And then how do we know and validate truth? Is it a reason? Is it authority? Is it revelation, the senses? Is there truth out there? Can it be known? And so I think when we start looking at these questions, a lot of some of the philosophers came up with ways to actually take those things out and push them through. While some of the others say that you can't know it, or it's just with the senses. And so we'll get into each of the specific philosophies later, but that's just one of those things that we're going to be going through when we get to the philosophies. A skeptical, if we cannot move on to point B until we have proved point A, and if in order to prove point A we must establish it with absolute certainty, then it looks as though we will have a very hard time proving anything at all. I want you to kind of read that over in your head a little bit. Reality will have to define truth if we can't prove reality. Can reality define truth if we can't prove reality? We can't prove truth. So it's saying if we can't know if anything around us is true, we can still move to potentially having reality, truth, even though we don't, even if it's contingent upon that being true, and we'll never know. And so it's basically saying you can get yourself into this box where you will never maybe even potentially be able to get out, because you really sit there and start thinking like, if I don't know anything's real, how can I know anything's true? And then you start, really coming in on yourself. And that's not the point of philosophy, is to get yourself so worked up that you don't believe anything. It's more of to push the boundaries and saying, well, you know what? In this situation, that's true. In this situation, that's true. And there's some commonalities and some universalities to no matter which of the scenarios we're going through. And so I think that that's the point. The point is not to limit yourself to shrink it, but it's actually to grow it and say, what are those major like life commonalities that we're having? So can you know truth? That's one of the big questions today that we're going to be answering. Can you know that your structure is Matthew Cordis for this course? Can you know that the world's ending this year? Can you know that there's a God? Can you know that 1 + 1 is 2? Can you know that you're tired today, or is that your body just tricking you? Can you know that today's May 23rd or September 3rd or September 6th or whenever you're watching this? Can that be known? Now, when we start to look at the bigger piece of things, how does our society validate truth? And when we start to look at those things, and I'm going to pause it real quick for you to take a 6-second break here in a second, so that you can pause and kind of explore this a little bit in a quick write. How does our society validate truth? How do we show what is true? So take a couple seconds, do a quick write, and then turn this back on after paused it. All right, so what did you come up with? Is it because of a common mass agreement? Is it because of um, the people who came before us? We've just been passing it along, or is it because of revered people? And so, starting to look at how do we validate truth and those types of things, it's an interesting question. Axiology: what is valuable in discourse and in action? Is what we say is valuable actually the way we live? Example, if we believe the individual child is at the center of education, then why do we require every child to be subjected to the same curriculum? And so are we really defining what is good and valuable and then pursuing those things is the axiology pieces. And there's two pieces to it. There's aesthetics and aesthetics. The aesthetics is what should I do? Again, this is the ethics of the whole thing is what should I do and where should I go? And aesthetics is what's beautiful and what can be expressed and what is valuable. What is that beauty in the world and how do we define it and how do we move forward? Ethics is what should we do to be good people? And so when we're starting to look at our role of the teacher here, it starts out with those three things. What are your metaphysical beliefs? What are your axiological beliefs? And what are your epistemological beliefs? And that gets us to a goal. And that's that mission statement piece. And we looked at the Point Lomas tonight where it was like creating community in Christ, moving forward in the gospel narrative and those types of things and really pushing forward. And I think that in itself is a goal. And then it goes through the political dynamics and the social forces and the economic conditions of the student faculty and the expectations of the immediate family and community. And then it comes out down to over here where we're talking about then we start to see the nature of our students, the role of the teachers, the curricular emphases, and that's going to then determine our educational practice. But it starts out with that goal. What is that goal? And that's only found by going through these three things and moving forward. if we're not doing that, it's really tough to get to this educational practice point and feel a satisfaction in knowing that we did it in a really satisfying way. So, with that, what is the role of the teacher? If we go back to here, nature of students, role of the teacher, curricular emphasis. So, if you take a look at those things, what is the role of the teacher? Is it to form community? Is it to, you know, uh, create different thinkers and create people who are going to go out and find the answers? Or is it someone who's imparting knowledge? And depending on which class, it may be different things. It may be someone who's setting up experiences. It may be someone who is leading someone to failure or pushing them farther. What's the role of the student? Are they the lead learner or are they the lead explorer? Are they the one who's supposed to be creating or are we supposed to be creating? What is our curricular emphasis? Um, One of the great examples is this course. Not a lot of places have a course that's similar to this, but what they do have is potentially a course where they go through some of the major, ebbs and turns of these of education history, but to really look at what is the purpose and what's the role of this educational piece. That's something that Point Loma actually puts emphasis on because they make a whole course out of it. What are our teaching methods and how did we choose them? What's the institution or district that we work for? And I think that comes down to it. I'll go back to this slide right here. Right here. Are we looking at our first steps into these things? Are we looking at the institution saying, does my idea of what should be happening fit what's going on there? Are we, when we're looking for those teaching methods, those things, do the curricular emphasis and the teaching methods fit who I am? And if not, can I reach that goal? Because if these things don't drive from the goal that you have, it's really tough to get to where you want to be. So that's where I'm going to wrap it for chapter 2. Again, go read the chapter, get those questions in the back, and then insert them back in for this week's. And if you have any questions, please leave them in. Ask the professor tab so that way other people can learn as well.